Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another MMFM Digital, the Miami Media and Film Market, bringing you a weekly live dose of entertainment goodness with some amazing interviews. And no less amazing this week, I'm very, very proud and honored to welcome a good friend and colleague to the show today, a very, very talented filmmaker, writer, commercial director, doing all sorts of things. And most of all, El Juanito right here from the 305. Carlos Gutierrez is our special guest today. We're so excited to bring him on the show in just a few minutes. But first, we always like to thank our sponsors, of course, Camacol, led by President Joe Chi, and my partner in crime, Patricia Arias, the co-founder of the Miami Media and Film Market, which helps bring you MMFM Digital each and every week. So what is going on in the industry headlines this week? A bombshell announcement between Universal and AMC Theaters that they are now agreeing to shorten the theatrical window to 17 days. That is nothing. I mean, to just give a sense of the amount of time that 17 days is, a little bit over 2 weeks. During that same time span, Warner Brothers would probably only be able to change the release date of Tenet, Christopher Nolan's film, about 27 times. So we're very, very interested to see how all this is going to work out. And speaking of things working out, I know that the fans out there love when I do a little improv karaoke. I never know how this is going to go. It's always a cappella. And in honor of our special guest from the 305 today, Carlos Gutierrez, I'm going to try the intro to Pitbull's Calle Ocho. And then right after that, we're going to bring our good friend Carlos Gutierrez in. So I hope you guys get ready and listen. And obviously, always leave me your comments and your remarks and how I'm doing. I try to improve a little bit every week. First time I'm trying my Pitbull song. So as he would say, dale. Ha! It's my 305 checking in for the remix. You know that 75th Street, Brazil. Well, this year it's going to be called Calle Ocho. Que hola gata, que hola omega. And this is how we going to do it. Dale. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. You want me? You know I want you. I know you want me. You know I want you. I know you want me. You know I want you. I know you want me. You know I want you. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Rumba. Ella quiere su rumba. ¿Cómo? Rumba. Sí. Ella quiere su rumba. All right. That's enough of that. So, once again, I want to welcome my good friend Carlos Gutierrez, a really talented filmmaker. I can't wait to jump into this conversation. But before we do, I want to show you a very special spot that he did. It's very cinematic. It's beautiful. It was for Chevy with a homegrown musical talent and actor who was seen most recently in the film Moonlight. So let's watch this little spot, and then right after, we'll jump into it with Carlos.
If you wanted something new, something different, something freaky, something sexy, something wild, you come to Miami to one of these, dive bars or open mic spots, and you find originality. The purpose of live music is to inspire people, it's to make you feel a certain way. It's just something about that connection between the audience and the person who's on stage. It's just magic. It's not really advertised. The commercial stuff is advertised, but if you want something gritty, if you want something original, if you want something with emotion and passion that hasn't been rehearsed, you gotta look for it. I like recording anything live in the moment because it's right there, it's visceral, because it's real, it's not fabricated, it's not recorded over and over and mixed and mastered. I get to play the music that I want and not the music that someone wants me to listen to, and put a little shine on us, local artists. A lot of things frustrate me with the music industry. I wish everybody just kind of spoke music. People don't speak music, people speak money. Live music is important to Miami because it unifies people. My name is Patrick Gregory DeSeal. I do poetry and I do music and performed it, and I got love, man.
Yeah. Carlos
Hey,
Gutierrez, welcome to MFM Digital, my friend.
how's it going, man?
I'm going good, bro. I really like that spot.
Thank you, thank you. That was an interesting one because Patrick came to us through the agency, and it was kind of just lucky for us that we were able to get him on, Chevy, and Chevy was able to pay for the whole commercial. And so what you saw there was kind of a director's cut. It was like a longer version, that featured a lot more of him and more behind the scenes. But the cool thing about Patrick is that not only is he like a Miami homegrown guy, he, wanted to show a little bit more of his character of who he is, because he's more of a poet, and he's just an amazing guy who just multi hyphenate kind of guy. And I think he was a little worried after playing the villain in Moonlight,
Right.
That's all people would know about him. So I think this was a cool opportunity, and he's a perfect representation of the kind of independent scene that's going on in South Florida and Miami, and how much homegrown talent just continues to just come out of the woodwork here, and I think it's very fortunate.
Absolutely. And obviously we're fortunate to have another homegrown talent, which is yourself.
Oh,
Out of the 305. So
yeah.
tell us, Carlos, I want to talk a little bit about your journey. Were you born in Miami or in Cuba, or raised here?
No, I was born in Miami to Cuban immigrants.
Right.
And basically I lived here, for a while, went to live in a couple of other cities, lived in Boston, New York City, and LA as well. So I've lived everywhere. I've gotten to see a lot of the country, and that's always been a great thing. But it's fun to come back home and, getting these movies made and commercials made, and it's been great, honestly.
Absolutely. Yeah. So at what age, in your sort of upbringing, in this, I guess, traditional Cuban American household, did you decide that this was a path you wanted to take? Did that come later, or was that something that you kind of already knew early on that directing was in your future?
Directing in the future is not a phrase you'll hear often in any immigrant household. I don't think a Cuban household, either. And so, originally I wanted to be a doctor, or at least I thought I did, and I was very young. And about halfway through my undergrad, I just decided that I wanted to do film, and I started by doing documentary. I started in like they say, the most inexpensive way to do it, which is documentary, because you have a story to tell. All you need is a camera and a subject. That's it. You don't need lights. You don't need cinematographers. You don't even need actors. And honestly, that was kind of my foray into it. And I still love to this day documentaries. I mean, for me, documentaries are becoming more visual, more visceral as time goes on, and they're becoming more cinematic, And that's how I got into it. Honestly, the first thing I ever did was a documentary about my father, and it was called Journey into Exile, and it was about how hard it was for him to become an immigrant here in the U.S. And it was a short documentary, but it ended up winning a couple like festivals and got some attention from it. And I ended up getting a number of gigs right out of college because of it. And that kind of was, the sort of pat on the back I needed to keep going forward. And, so that way I actually went into advertising, but if you want.
Right. No, absolutely. We're going to get into all that. But yeah, like you said, documentary is becoming such a hot format. Just look at Netflix alone, probably, the most watched thing the whole year so far, not just due to COVID, was a docuseries, obviously Tiger King, the local documentary Mucho Mucho Amor, doing very well on Netflix.
Right.
So definitely the documentary format is super hot, but definitely going back to your journey. So, you started to kind of get this traction with this documentary about your father, and then, but, you still sort of felt like you needed some more formal training, right? So you ended up doing your undergrad, I think it was at Tufts. Is that correct?
Yeah, I did my undergrad at Tufts. That's where I actually produced the documentary. And it was an interesting choice, because I had a choice to do a short film with a friend of mine that meant nothing to me. It was just some silly story that, 19-year-olds or 20-year-olds come up with. And I had the choice between that or something that was emotionally relevant to me and that kind of moved me, and, was something I really could see myself pushing through for. Basically, it almost took me a whole year to do it. And in fact, it was funny because initially it was supposed to be about a 45-minute documentary, and I lost the whole thing. Computer crashed. it was these are schools. Schools don't exactly have backup servers, so I lose the entire documentary.
Oh, wow.
However, I had luckily backed up on a tape or on a hard drive, may have been. I backed up a rough cut of it, so I was able to retrace my steps, to a degree. But I had to do that in a span of like 2 months, where it had already taken, 9 to 10 months just to get to that point. So
Sure.
it was insane, and it teaches you, I think, a little bit about your character, and if you can push through perseverance and things like that, and still come out on the same deadline, everything. I mean, it just teaches you that in film nothing is perfect, right? So
Right.
it's the world of happy accidents. You just got to embrace them. If it rains on the day you're supposed to shoot, just keep shooting. You never know.
Yeah. Make it a rain scene.
There you go.
But yeah, no, it's definitely great advice. And, obviously you're going to have a lot of advice to give, some of our filmmaking talent that's coming up now in the industry. So we're definitely going to kind of come back to you a few times about that. And then, so, you're able to finally complete this documentary after that, little sort of mishap with the footage. And now, so what, do you want to go straight into work? Do you start to intern? Do you want to continue your education?
No, I definitely I was hungry to do work, like to get paid.
Right.
And listen, finding work as a director, editor, anything is really difficult. And the documentary certainly helped me get my foot in the door with advertising. And that way I basically worked my way into working on commercials. And from there, I ended up directing a number of commercials, but I wasn't really happy with what I was doing. It just wasn't emotionally fulfilling. It was paying the bills, and that was about it. And but it gave me a really good sense of commercials, being on sets that were big. For me, I mean, I'd been on nothing. I'd been on short film sets at that point. And but it's interesting. I was able in college to do a few kind of days of PA work, and some of them were these kind of like no budge feature films, but I did do a couple of days on Good Will Hunting, and that was pretty cool.
Oh, wow.
Because, yeah, I got to see, and they were shooting it in Boston where I was in school, and I got to see like the demystification of the process, which is the biggest thing of this whole industry. It's
Right.
all you see is movies, and you just wonder how in the world are people dealing with celebrities and filming, and it was the most quietly run, tight little film. Like, you would not think about this gigantic film it became. It was just this little quiet film that they were shooting in corners of Boston, and that was cool to see, because I was able to kind of see the process of like a guy who was at the top of his game and still is, Gus Van Sant, the director of the movie, and Matt Damon, who was nobody out of him, and Robin Williams, and it was just incredible. They didn't have a lot of lights. It wasn't a big trailers and trailers and trailers. It was a small production.
Yeah.
And that was a really big kind of learning lesson for me. That was a big visceral experience.
No, you're totally right. And, you kind of forget, because everyone remembers sort of the hoopla afterwards, and Matt and Ben winning their Oscar, and obviously
Right.
Robin Williams and all the accolades he got later on. But you're right. It was a very indie, small production that was able to do really great things,
Yeah.
So that's,
It wasn't a big film. I mean, it was the reason I think the people in Boston really embraced it. I went to school with a lot of guys and girls from Boston, and they really like took that film under their wings. Like, when those guys won the Oscar, it was like a homegrown thing. It was like Moonlight for people in Miami. It's like, it was a big deal for them that it wasn't like a polished version of Boston. It was like the real Boston. And that was cool. It was cool to kind of live through that moment,
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so obviously now you have this sort of on-set experience. You get kind of a glimpse of the world of Hollywood and actors and all that stuff. So what happens after that? Do you decide to come back to Miami, or sort of what's your next step? What are you thinking in your head?
I came back to Miami probably because I was homesick and sick of the cold. Both things. Boston is really, really cold. And so I worked like I said, for a few years in advertising, kind of got tired of that. And on a bit of a whim, almost like a bet, I ended up applying to NYU grad school for film directing, right? So that's to get your master's. I'd already been out of school 3 or 4 years at that point. So I kind of, had forgotten school, and, I said, no, I don't want to go to film school. Like, what's the point? blah, blah, blah. And, I was fortunate enough to get picked. Honestly,
Wow.
it was total. To this day, I still think it was kind of the dean kind of took a chance on me and a couple other people. She kind of always told us that too. It was really funny.
Wow.
She was actually Roger Corman's wife, Julie Corman, who I still stay in touch with.
Oh, wow.
And she's a producer, and she told me, like, and a couple other people who she let in, like, I just have a good feeling about you guys, and I'm going to let you guys in. But it was, it's one of those things that just good luck, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. And for a lot of people that don't know, obviously NYU's film school is pretty. I'd say you probably have the AFI and then NYU right after that, and USC and a couple of other ones. But it is always in the top 3, top 5 film schools in the country. So, getting into a school like that is no easy task. And, and obviously just quite an accomplishment in and of itself.
Like I said, luck of the draw, man. I could have just, not gone there. And ironically enough, I'm not going to say the state school, but I didn't get into that state school, but I got into NYU for film. So,
but it's I'm a hurricane, so it's fine. We could say
yeah, no, and it's total luck of the draw, and honestly, being there was a gift unto itself. Just being able to be there with, I can go into that, but having Spike Lee as a teacher, Martin Scorsese coming in and teaching guest classes, Barbara DeFina, his ex-wife, and the producer of Goodfellas, coming in and teaching classes. The list goes on and on. I mean, Spike, what was great about Spike was that Spike, talking about demystification of the process, became like my mentor because it was a full-time program with him. Mm-hmm. And it was almost a 2-year program of just being with him, where we not only took classes with him, but then you had the opportunity to apply to be his assistant on his features. So the man doesn't stop, the man doesn't sleep. I don't know how he gets all these things done. Because he's teaching a full-time gig at NYU grad program. He's then shooting a Showtime series, prepping a Beyonce Pepsi commercial, and then getting ready to shoot 25th Hour. Things like it was just the guy doesn't stop. So the cool thing was that it was an opportunity to be on his wings and watching how a master like that works. And it was great. I mean, honestly, there's really no two ways about it. The guy was an incredible mentor.
Absolutely. And, obviously all that, plus he's at every Knicks game, so I don't know how he does it.
I can tell you other stories about that because, there's not a lot of film people, at least in NYU, that were sports fans. And I was one of the few. I'm a rabid sports fan, as you know. And him and I would, kind of josh each other all the time about Knicks versus Heat constantly.
Wow.
It was a constant thing that we would, it's one of the few times you would actually see the guy smile, because
right.
The guy he is just a laser beam of focus. There's a reason he's a legend, and it was an incredible opportunity really to see it from the ground up of projects that he was working on. He would show us rough cuts of, TV shows and say how like, okay, these are the notes coming in and how would you address them? And, and he's Spike Lee, I mean, he doesn't have to address the note, but it was great because you really got to see behind the curtain, behind the veil. Oh,
absolutely. And I always keep saying that the film industry in particular is probably one of the last few apprenticeship businesses, where you still really need to learn by doing and by watching others. And the fact that you were exposed to pretty much the best in their field between Gus Van Sant and then obviously Spike Lee and getting to listen to Scorsese, there's a quick... it's incredible. There's a great quote by Einstein. My wife told me this morning for her Instagram, but I'm going to share it with the audience. The only source of knowledge is experience, and that was from Einstein. So, and I think that there is no better field than this industry. And obviously in your case, what was it like getting exposed to so much knowledge by these sort of industry titans at such a young age?
It was amazing, man. I mean, it was interesting because I always knew I wanted to go back to commercials when I got out of school. And some of the people there discouraged that and some people encouraged it. I mean, it's the nature of the beast. Some people want to, do indie films all their lives, and some people want to do both and straddle between both worlds. And what it showed me was, Paul Thomas Anderson would come in and he was, all indie. He was like Mr. Indie, right? And then you would have M. Night Shyamalan come in and give a class, and he's basically Mr. Hollywood at that point. He was literally the most successful director that had come out of NYU in years.
Right.
So, it was interesting because you get to see the kind of like career spectrum. And, I'm not even talking now about like all the other amazing guests, like we had Nicholas Pileggi, who wrote Goodfellas and Casino with Scorsese. And he gave us, weeks of lectures about like his process. So I think the cool thing is you really got to see everything, and, you're paying for that experience, like that immersion into film school is not about the equipment, especially nowadays. I have a lot of, people have asked me, like, where I'm on my sets, and they'll come up to me and say, hey, would you go to film school? And my answer is like, maybe not. I might not even want to at this point, because again, the word was film school. Now it's everything's digital. So you can shoot a movie for $60,000 with your friends.
Yeah.
And it'll look amazing. That wasn't possible when I got there. So, but anyway, so there you go.
Plus, Spike Lee is now a masterclass online, so you could just order that.
Damn masterclass! Yeah, I mean, in all seriousness, not to poke at my own alumni, but like, you got a masterclass which has Aaron Sorkin, Spike Lee, and Scorsese. Right. You got a $60,000 budget that you can pull together from family, friends, grants. You can go do it yourself. I mean, there's really I will tell you, the biggest thing I learned from NYU, beyond all that I told you, was working with actors and learning the craft of talking to actors. And that doesn't mean directing actors. That means talking to them. Because one thing is to direct an actor. Anyone can direct an actor. Go high, go low, get bigger, get smaller, whatever you want to say. But talking to actors in their language was literally the biggest thing I learned, because I was A, petrified to do it before I got there, and B, I was terrible at it. I had done a couple little short films, none of which I sent to NYU because they wouldn't have let me in. And so, I mean, for me, it's really about learning your craft. I mean, that was the big thing that it gave me.
No, absolutely. And then probably some networking too, because, you have folks that you come up with in the school, plus obviously your mentors that, you could maybe, go back to at a later time. So, I think those two elements are absolutely critical. You're totally right. And so, now you're, let's say you're out of film school now, you have this graduate degree, you have, you made a couple of short films, like either during and after, right, that received some recognition.
Yeah. So I can tell you about that. I mean, the biggest kind of like pat on the back from a film standpoint that I got was I was awarded a Directors Guild of America award. It was a Best Latino Filmmaker award that they give out to film school students around the country. And I got like first place, and it was a film that, it took me almost a year to get done between shooting, editing, posting. The biggest thing that NYU taught me, aside from that, was that resiliency and scrappiness. Like, basically, I had to raise all the money on my own. They don't pay for a thing. All they give you is the equipment, which frankly is a little difficult. Even that coordination of getting the equipment is not a 1, 2, 3. And so what it taught me was, man, if I believe in this project enough, I can convince other people to buy into it, and that was a big thing. And it just evolved. So it started with a 7-minute film, then it became a 15-minute film, and then my thesis, which was about 20. But then as I was graduating from film school, Showtime saw my Student Academy Award nominated short, Wet Foot Dry Foot, right? And so they had seen it. I was about to graduate, and they said, hey, we have an opportunity for Hispanic Heritage Month to create a short film, but we got to do it a year in advance. So we got to award whoever's going to do it a year before it's going to air on Showtime. So I went into the competition, and I was thankfully awarded the grand prize. And that was an amazing experience, because I had literally just transitioned out of film school, and Era was in LA going to like the Showtime offices and pitching for their executives this like 25-minute short film, and I had to pitch them 3 ideas. They weren't like just bring one. They were like, we want to see 3 ideas, and they got to be fleshed out, and you're going to sit here in a room and pitch it to us. Wow. And so from a like experience in a studio format, like, hey, you got to go pitch an idea to a studio executive, it was, you can't buy that kind of experience just thrown into it.
Absolutely. And just to take a step back, and I want to get back to this 25-minute film for Showtime, wet foot, dry foot, for those that don't know, that refers to a specific law that was in place at the time for Cubans trying to get to U.S. shores. So talk a little bit about what that story was, that sort of got you into that, that Showtime deal.
So that short film took a long time to develop because it was innately a Charlie Chaplin satire. I mean, it's a ridiculous law that was put in place that somehow allowed Cuban refugees to set foot on dry land and be allowed into the U.S. versus if they were caught 50 yards offshore by a Coast Guard or Border Patrol, whatever it might be, they would have to be sent back and repatriated towards Cuba.
To Cuba, right.
And so, the innate, just comedic element of it was what I battled constantly. It was like, how do you not make this a comedic thing? Because it's just...
Or a satire, yeah, essentially, right.
If I told you that as a pitch, fictional, you wouldn't believe me. It'd be like, that's crazy. Nobody would ever write
Yeah, common sense would tell you as long as you're in U.S. waters, then they should bring you in. But the fact that they're making these poor Cubans that are on this raft trying to get to freedom to literally step on a piece of dry land before they're allowed to have, their asylum. It just seems insane when you think about it.
So listen, it took a long time. So the story is these two Cuban rafters get stranded on a deserted little island somewhere in the middle of the Florida Straits, international waters. It's never specified where. And they basically are in survival mode. They're eating, bugs for dinner and, getting sunburned and trying to figure out how in the world to get off this island. So it's cast away with just another guy, essentially. Right. And so, the way I wrote it was just starting with a simple seed of an idea, and just developing it from there. And so it turns into a survival movie, and I love if you can create like a genre movie that has moral and ethical kind of codes very subtly placed for the audience. Those are the things I love, It's
right.
So what happened was these two guys who were completely different backgrounds, two completely different perspectives on life, were forced to work together to get their goal, which was to land in, Florida.
Right.
And so it became just like this kind of survivalist thriller, essentially. But I thought it was, it was incredibly well done. I think thanks to the whole crew that helped, my producers, my ADs, my cinematographer. And it was very well received and certainly helped me, right out of film school to get a lot of more work out of it.
Oh, absolutely. And so, that was a brilliant film. I saw it. So congrats again on that one. I still can remember scenes from that film in my head, and I haven't watched it for years. Yeah. So yeah, definitely. And so what was the final, because I think the audience is curious now. You said you pitched 3 projects to Showtime. What was the winning project, so to speak? What did they greenlight?
So the winning project, going back to sort of the same thing, it was a thriller where a married couple takes the wrong suitcase coming out of the airport. And it was called Escondido, which translates to hidden. And it was they come back from the airport after coming back from a trip. They open the suitcase, and lo and behold, they realize they took the wrong suitcase, but there's something inside the suitcase that they shouldn't have seen. And very soon after that, someone comes knocking on their door for the suitcase. And it becomes this like cat and mouse. Like, should they tell him that they have it? Should they tell him that that they never saw it? So it becomes this really interesting kind of like dissolution of a marriage put in a thriller kind of context. So this couple that's already having problems is now forced to deal immediately and viscerally with this situation. Right. And it kind of comes to a head in the course of like one night.
Oh, wow. Very cool. That's a great concept, especially, and it's funny because you're coming and you're touching on these different genres and ideas. But, creatively at the time now that you're kind of coming into your own as a filmmaker, what are you kind of leaning towards now? Like, do you feel like your sensibility as a creative or your approach to these projects? Is it just whatever inspires you, or is there something specific you're looking for in your material?
No, I mean, definitely what inspires me. I probably should say this from the beginning, but I'm a writer by trade. I mean, that's my first love. I've been writing poetry since I was 12, wrote short stories till I was like 16, 17. And by perfect chance, I just stumbled into screenwriting. It was just like a natural progression. And directing really came as a result of the screenwriting because I think almost every screenwriter will tell you, you visualize it in your head. And so if you can prove to other people that you know how to work with actors and set up shots, those are the two most important things to translating your work. So if you're writing, you have to be able to communicate that. But,
Right.
the thing I tend to gravitate towards more so happen to be thrillers. I mean, there's just something to me that's just interesting from why is this story happening now? Kind of, for example, like I said, with Escondido, it was already a drama about the solution of a marriage, but you put it in a timeline that it has to happen that night.
Right.
That's why the story happened that night. Or you pick a character who has really they don't see a future, they don't see a way out of their situation, and you put them into a situation that forces them to reevaluate their whole life. So that's the kind of stories I like. One that's just coming to mind like that is like Collateral, right? Like the Jamie Foxx character.
Right.
That's a drama. It's a guy who literally cannot do anything with his life. Everything's stuck in neutral. He's constantly procrastinating. Oh, it's going to happen one day. And the situation with Tom Cruise's character, the hitman, is what brings it all to happen in one evening.
Right. No, it's fascinating that you point that out, because a lot of times when people think of these movies, they just think of the plot and the suspense,
right.
But you don't stop to think about, that this is also a story about the relationship between these two men that were, in the course of one night, and them kind of bringing their own baggage to the table. And there's kind of a ping pong match, between not only what they're trying to accomplish, but personalities and psyches and emotions. And unless you're well trained in, like you said, how to deal with actors on that level, that's where I think the really good stuff starts to come out.
Yeah. I mean, I'm fascinated by like identity, duality, all those kind of themes I love. People that have to hide their identity or bury it way down below to appease society. And then, something has to draw it out in the film.
Right.
That to me is fascinating, Or someone who has an incredible character arc, like in The Godfather, you have Michael Corleone, who starts as this golden child, veteran, soldier, college boy, and becomes the head of by the end of the 3 hours, he becomes the head of a mafia. It's how do that's what I'm always fascinated by. It's like, how can someone's character transition due to the events around them?
Yeah, that story arc and the character arc and everything just kind of evolving through the course of the story, which is brilliant. And so in terms of getting back to your story, so, now you're this hot filmmaker at Showtime doing this great work, Escondido, it's a hit. But, like you said, you did have this interest in commercial work, and you've done sort of a long string of amazing commercials working with some of the biggest brands. So I want to touch on that part of your career a little bit before circling back to your feature film, the thriller Locked In, which I definitely want to end on that note, because that's going to be a fascinating film that hopefully folks are going to be able to watch soon. But let's talk a little bit about sort of the commercial side of your career.
Yeah, commercials, they're their own beast. I mean, directors are basically hired hands. You're not writing the commercial. For people who don't know, it's basically you're given a commercial. It's already written. Let's say it's for Verizon, right? And they write the commercial, and they have the way they think it should happen. And it's up to you as a director to create a treatment, a visual lookbook, essentially, with some text in there to describe what you're doing and how you would approach the narrative. And everybody has a different version. It's just like a documentary. You can have one topic and 4 different documentary directors, and you'll get 4 completely different films. Right. So with commercial, similar approach. It's the same thing. You basically are presented, let's say, a comedic 30-second commercial, and it's how you would cast it, how you would shoot it, what would be your tonal approach. I mean, it's been great in that sense, because it really has helped me with transitioning into features, because I've been able to explain my visual approach to the work.
Right.
And that's what commercial.
Yeah, and you could totally see that, going back to that Chevy spot we showed at the beginning, very cinematic. It has a docu feel, very visceral. So there are a lot of very creative elements that's not your typical 30-second, 1-minute promo, for the latest whatever, Mazda or Chevy. So I like that you're able to, infuse a little bit of your creativity and personality. And there's certain leeway. Obviously, like you said, you're still working for a client, for a major brand, and there's tons of approvals and folks that have to look at it. But when you're able to kind of infuse it with a certain level of personality and something creative and personal, you can tell the quality of it.
Yeah, I mean, it is at the end of the day, you still have a lot of people that are going to put their input into it, much like a film. But the thing is, you kind of are a hired gun. You kind of come in, you do your work, you turn it over, and they do their kind of post production on their own.
Absolutely.
And the interesting thing, the reason I wanted to show you Chevy is because I treated that one more like a film. Like
Right.
Patrick and I really wanted to make something that was very similar to his style, that would showcase his personality. And, it was not that it would have any kind of like forced product, like a Chevy car. And, the client, look, to their credit, they were super happy to do it. Chevy was like, you don't even have to show a Chevy car. We just want to be part of the process.
Yeah, and I noticed that you don't actually see the car. It's just about this young artist's personality and what he thinks about the music industry and his own work, which is fascinating. And they just kind of went with that. I think it's incredible. And so during this whole time, and you're doing all this great commercial work. You are developing additional features and you're writing scripts. But the one that I obviously want to focus on now is the one that you recently just shot, and that hopefully we're going to be able to see very soon. Locked In, which stars a couple of well-known actors, Mina Suvari and Jeff Fahey. How did that come together?
Well, that was an interesting story. I mean, I've sold 2 scripts in my life. One is Black and Blue, which was an adaptation of Wet Foot, Dry Foot, the thesis film. And the second one was Locked In. So Locked In, I wrote it a few years ago, and it was interesting. I really wanted to make this kind of character study, but again, put it in this kind of pot boiler situation where this woman who you think you know who she is put into the situation. You can't imagine there's any way she's going to kind of survive it. And, so it's kind of a version of Panic Room, if you remember the movie of Jodie Foster, with a very young Kristen Stewart, where it's this, it's almost like a mother-daughter drama playing out inside of the course of one night where thieves break into their house. Well, this is similar, where Mina Suvari is playing the mother, Maggie, and she and her daughter basically get trapped in a high-tech self-storage facility, like the ones you see driving on the road. They can see into the lockers. And so I just love the idea of like a labyrinth, like this idea that there's these endless hallways that all basically mesh together. They all look the same. And in a sense, because the movie takes place in the course of one night, it is almost like they're on a spaceship, in a strange way. Like there's no easy way to call for help. There's certain things that happen in the film that prevent that. And, but I wanted to really focus on the acting. And as my feature film debut, I wanted to make a thing where I could really just have the actors in the same space a lot, much like a play, and really just play out things, so that I was more concerned that the acting would be really well done and that the visuals would be really consistent and look, good.
Right. No, absolutely. And Mina Suvari, obviously someone a lot of earlier in her career getting that big break with American Beauty and doing such great work. What was it like working with an actor like that that's, been working for such a long time over the span of, well over 2 decades?
Mina's a professional. I mean, dude, she honestly would nail it in 2 takes. I mean, she's that good. I mean, she's, like you said, she's been a professional for 20 years working in the industry at very high levels. As a first-time filmmaker on a feature level, I was very fortunate to get 2 actors who I admired incredibly, her and Jeff Fahey. Jeff Fahey is, this, amazing actor with an incredible track record, and, has worked with Robert Rodriguez, Clint Eastwood, you name it, the list goes on and on. Right. And, the 2 of them together was just great from a veteran actor presence. They helped guide me at times when I was a little stuck. And again, I could see why certain independent films kind of run over budget, or because, you're kind of trying to find your way through. For them, they helped me because it was automatic for them on a lot of takes. They just knew they were like, trust us on this. We know what we're doing.
Wow. So, that's incredible.
Yeah, it was really great.
And then obviously timing wise, you were thankfully able to finish this before everyone kind of went into their own lockdown, locked in. Yes. So, it's a very, very apt title.
We're rushing to make sure that we can get it out soon. As I told you earlier, the film is in the final stages of post-production, followed by a trailer, which will be available. And then hopefully everything works out. And maybe by the end of the year, we can have it on available to audiences. I don't even want to guess how. Streaming, theaters,
Right.
it's anybody's guess.
Yeah, like I mentioned in the intro, between theatrical windows shifting, release dates moving around, VOD being so hot right now, the streamers going bananas, running out of content, people streaming entire platforms over a weekend. I really think that, the industry is very volatile right now, but I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity, particularly for new voices to kind of establish themselves in the industry once all is said and done. And, we are so excited to see Locked In. Obviously, as soon as there's a trailer, send it to us. MMFM would love to promote the heck out of it. And maybe we'll bring you back on, right before the release.
Yeah. I mean, from my standpoint, I think it's a film that will hopefully get exposure and allow me to kind of tell the stories, Latino stories that I want to tell. I have so many stories as a writer that I want to kind of get out there into the world that you and I have talked about that are based on real stories. And I think it's a good thing to start with something that's a genre film because it gets people's attention. And it's a short film, so it's about 90 minutes. It'll probably end up being, and it's a good ride.
Right, absolutely. So we're excited for that and everything that you have coming up, once we start to get back into the swing of things, hopefully sooner rather than later. But yeah, definitely this has been a great journey. The time has just flown by. We went well over the 30-minute mark. We probably could have gone an hour, but we did. I think this was a really good journey. And obviously, Carlos, you're a good friend, a good friend of the conference. So we're so happy to see you doing well. We're so happy that you got that movie made. We're so excited to see it. And yeah, I want to, sign off to the troops. I'm going to put you on hold one more second, and then we'll bring you back at the end. But thank you so much, Carlos, for being on the show today. Yeah, awesome. Hang on. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Carlos Gutierrez, great friend of the conference, as I mentioned before, and the family doing amazing, amazing work. So that's what we have for this week. On behalf of the Miami Media and Film Market, MMFM Digital, and Camacol, my partner, Patty Arias, I want to thank everyone for tuning in once again. And as I always say, until the next time, happy streaming.